Great. Excellent. Thank you, Eksteen. Well, I'm Blanca Vergara, for the people who don't know me, because almost everybody does. I'm really excited to see just familiar faces here. I am one of the people behind MentorWE. And today is my pleasure to introduce you to Eksteen van de Waal. He is a very scientific and very enthusiastic gentleman who has put together all his enthusiasm and personal experience with a lot of scientific background to talk about how to have a better mentoring conversation, specifically from the point of view of receiving feedback. Because when you are with somebody who is going to give you feedback, sometimes we don't take that full advantage of that conversation. And he's going to guide us today in that regard. So welcome everybody, and welcome Eksteen, and I leave you the floor.
Well, hello, and thank you very much, Blanca. Okay, so just to recap a little bit of what Blanca said, we've had a webinar before this, and in that webinar we talked about what are the things that get in your way of receiving feedback. So in that we did a lead-in, and we also looked at things like what kind of triggers there are. We talked about 3 different triggers, and we covered the first set of triggers. Today we're going to cover the second and third types of triggers that get in one's way. So we'll do a small little recap in the beginning, just to link it back to what we did before. If you want to go look in more detail at what we discussed the previous time, please have a look at the webinar and from the previous session, and that should help you with that. Okay. We also have a workshop coming up in June, if I remember correctly. It's June, right, Blanca? And then in June we'll also we can take a more practical approach. So today we're talking about a lot of things and more in a theoretical way. But in the workshop, we're actually going to be doing stuff. And then we will also look at motivation and drivers and what are the things that underpin your reasons for feeling happy or enjoying your work, okay, and interactions with others. So last time, let me just take this, move the camera, sorry. Last time we looked at the mentoring versus coaching growth formula, and those things that said that today, that says under today, that was the previous time, and what we'll be looking at now is from identity and relationship triggers onwards. Okay. So, where am I? Just a small little recap again. I like solving problems, so I tend to be a little bit creative when it comes to finding solutions. I like to give hope to others and to myself. I think the hope is one of those important things we have to have in life. Relationship builder, because I believe that we are all interconnected, and I do believe that we all need to appreciate each other more, so I like to express that as well. And I enjoy being curious about things and discovering new things and figuring things out. So what we're going to do in June in the workshop is we're actually going to look at what are your drivers. These are my top 6 drivers, the top 5. And we'll do the same for everybody in June as well. You'll get a full report that explains what all these items mean. So tonight is webinar 2. I'm going to have a quick recap. So last time we talked about 3 different triggers. We talked about the truth triggers. So that's when somebody gives you feedback and you say, well, okay, you know what? That is not right. What you're telling me is not correct. And variations of that. Tonight we'll be looking at relationships. So the triggers normally go like, who are you to tell me that? Or identity triggers that says, oh my God, I'm always like that. I'm never good enough, things like that. All right, so we look at those last 2, the relationship and identity triggers tonight. So last time we said content evaluation, that's the truth triggers. Relationships has to do with our interactions or the interplay between people, and identity has to do with who I am. So there's some more just text there to explain that. These slide decks are available obviously within the webinar, so you can always look back at them again. So we looked at 3 different types of feedback within truth and truth triggers. We looked at appreciation, coaching, and evaluation. And we said that appreciation is something that we always have to give to each other to be able to allow for a person to hear anything else. So appreciation, there's a rule of thumb in between 3 and 11. Below 3, there's diminishing returns. Above 11, there's diminishing returns. So I generally go in the Netherlands, give somebody 5 pieces of appreciation before you give anything constructive criticism or anything that you want somebody to work on. And the same is true for yourself. It's easier to hear those things that you can work on to improve if you've heard appreciation. And appreciation starts with something as simple as please and thank you. So just saying thank you, this is precisely what I needed, is already a very important step. So coaching is all about helping. So the ultimate goal there is, how can I help you? The moment the conversation strays from me helping you, or it becomes passive aggressive, it's not coaching anymore. Evaluation is comparison. So it's, you compare against a set of criteria. You say, well, are the criteria objective, and have I agreed them? All those things are true as well. But if I haven't set criteria to evaluate somebody against, I cannot evaluate them. So the moment I tell somebody they're not good enough at something, or that they need to improve something, the question is, have I ever told them what would good enough look like? So evaluation, again, is comparing something which is a baseline or a standard to something that is actually performance given. So it'll either be on par, below par, or above par. So set 5 to 1 appreciation to everything else. So now let's get to the stuff that we're going to dive into for tonight. So relationship triggers. You know, when that little voice in your head goes like, who the hell do you think you are? Or who are you to tell me that? Or what gives you the right to talk to me like that? That's a relationship trigger kicking in. So that means it has to do with the person and with your relationship with the person. So what happens when we have conversations with people that we care about or that we are in a relationship with? We sometimes have switch track conversations. So the age-old thing of you never give me flowers anymore. So let's use that as an example. So somebody comes in the door, gives you flowers, and you go like, what is this for? What have you done wrong now? Instead of going like, thank you. So the conversation starts already with, here are some flowers because I love you. And the next moment, there's already 2 trails of thought. The one is a thank you, and the other one is, what have you done wrong? And then where does the conversation go? So sometimes you get that conversations have a similar starting point, but then people start having 2 different conversations next to each other in parallel. And it's not that the one conversation is more important than the other, but we tend to stick to our guns and stick to our parallel discussions. So if there's one thing that I figured out with my husband today, which I'm very grateful for, is that when we deal with stressful situations in different ways. So for instance, I will go and look for people to talk to and go look for a hug because that's the way I am. I'm one of those cuddly kind of people, very tactile. He's not. He's very much sort of like, you give me some time to deal with this, and then I'll get back to you. And we've been battling for years with that. And finally, it sort of clicked today that when he's giving me a little bit more than what than he can normally just naturally give, I should appreciate that as well. And so that appreciation we were talking about today as well. We were doing a lot of switch tracking. He would go in his direction, I would go in my direction, and we never sort of seemed to meet. And I think it's also something we need to be careful with when we give feedback. Sometimes I will say, for instance, I think you can improve the typos in your document, and the other person will hear, I'm never good enough and I don't do anything good enough. All right. But that's an identity trigger, which we'll get to in a second. So what are the first things we need to do is we need to separate the what from the who or the whom. So the what is the thing that we're talking about or giving feedback on or receiving feedback on, and who is the person. So whatever the person tells us, we need to be able to separate ourselves from what they're telling us and who the person is that's telling us. Sometimes we get in a scenario where, who the hell are you to tell me this, for instance, is typically one of those scenarios where somebody doesn't seem to have all the knowledge or don't have all the information or don't know the context, and from your perspective, and you feel like, but yeah, who are you to tell me this? So then instead of saying, who are you to tell me this, it's important to say, what is this person trying to tell me, and how can I focus on that? Okay. So typical relationship triggers happens when we have to look at what we think of the person. So we judge them based on their skill or judgment, their credibility, and the trust that we place in them. So if we don't trust somebody, we won't allow the information to come in. We don't allow the feedback to land. When we think they're not credible, so they don't understand the context, they don't understand the information, they don't understand what we're going through, then it's a case of, they say that we discount it. We basically say the relationship trigger kicks in.
Ja, hij zei dat het 2 keer medicine was van 2 keer €6 nog wat.
Okay. Gea, ik ga heel even op mute zetten, oké?
Goed was en dat hij dat...
Just quickly muted Gea, because I don't think we're supposed to be here in the medication conversation. Okay, so the next one is skill and judgment, as I said. So we judge them on this skill, and we judge their ability to judge or evaluate things. So strangers rock, i.e., if you're not, when you want to get a certain amount of information or feedback on something you do, it's interesting to go and talk to somebody that is a stranger to you, where you do not have the relationship with, and ask them about the same what or the same content as the person that you have the relationship with has given you the feedback on. So your spouse comes to you and gives you some feedback, which you're not happy with, then go talk to somebody that knows your spouse, but you don't really know, to see, well, that knows you, but not necessarily the spouse, either way, and see what's the difference in the information they give you concerning the same topic. Further on the relationship triggers. Things about how we feel treated about them. Do we feel appreciated? Are we allowed to have our autonomy and our own ability to make decisions? Can we freely affiliate, or are we accepted? And then there's 2 others I've added there called status and role. They're not per se relationship triggers, but they're all types of triggers that come from a book called Beyond Reason. I've got a link there at the bottom of the page to a PDF summary of it. When you are in a conversation with somebody and it's going really rough and they're starting to behave in ways you're like, this is not really positive. On that PDF, on the first page, there's 2 tables with just 5 elements in it. It's a shortcut way to just look at how can I analyze the conversation in the moment, and then use that to, let me just open the document and I'll show you. So in the moment, I can make a decision as to what is going on and what's going wrong. So this is the PDF document that I've got there in the link. So for instance, if a person is not appreciated, and appreciation is a very important trigger for them, it's core concern, you'll see that what's in the right-hand column is what happens. So when I'm not appreciated, I tend to react negatively or contrary to my own interests. Okay, so if you're in a conversation, you see somebody starting to react negatively and contrary to their own interests, it might be that there's an appreciation problem. You haven't expressed appreciation. You haven't told them how much you care or care about what they find important.
Eksteen, are you showing us the file?
Can you not see it? Am I not?
We see the PowerPoint presentation, but not the.
Sorry, I need to swap to the other one. That helps. Thanks, Blanca. Thanks, Blanca. Okay, that's better. Now makes more sense, right? Okay, now I can see people nod. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, so on the right-hand column there, you will see that it says to react negatively or contrary to my own interest in the top. Where does that come from? Which is the emotion that triggers it? I'm being angry. I'm angry or impatient. And which core concern or core trigger is not being met? It's appreciation. All right. This is a book that was written by some Harvard professors Normally this is used in negotiation, part of negotiation tactics and understanding how negotiations derail. So underneath here, this is what happens if things are going well. Right. So by looking at what's in the right-hand column, you can see what is if the conversation is turning around and becoming positive. And by looking at the top part there, it says, we can basically see if things go wrong, where do they go wrong? And then you can link back to the left column and see if you can turn it around to get to the bottom part of the page again. All right. So the link, as I said, is in there. So you can always refer back to it. Let's get back to the PowerPoint presentation. All right. So when we look at relationships, relationships usually are locked in a relationship system. So relationships that do not exist on their own. It's all about the interaction and how those interactions come about. So yes, this is called the 3 steps back method. So basically we take 3 steps back or look at 3 different elements of the conversation, and then we see how or where does the problem start. Okay. So firstly, we've got something called the you and me intersections. Then we have the roles and or accidental adversaries structure, and then we'll look at the big picture. All right. So when it comes to you and me intersections, it tends to be that I have a specific intent. So my intent is maybe positive or mostly positive, because intentions is never pure, unfortunately. So I say something, and that creates a reaction with the other person. So firstly, what I say triggers something from their past, a coping mechanism or something similar. That makes them react in a specific way. However, it also has to do with impact. So it's a case of I will have an action, that action will have an impact. The impact can be positive or negative, that will create the reaction. Then the person will have their own intent that they attach to that, and then they will produce an action. So I smile at someone, the impact on them is positive, so they react with a positive smile because they want to be friendly as well. I tell someone, who the hell are you to tell me that? They go, there, that's my action. The impact on them is, oh my God, he sounds just like my mother. Then the reaction is, I am your wife. I'm allowed to tell you this. You married me, you know, and so forth. And then the whole reaction and action system kicks into place, you know. So when we look at relationship and you and me interactions, the easiest way to break through this is firstly, analyze your intent. Secondly, realize that the impact on someone is more important than your intention. So even if you think, oh, but I didn't mean it like that, the way it came across to them is what's really important. That's what hurt, not your intentions. And the next item is we need to evaluate our actions and reactions. And to change this relationship system, the only thing we need to do is change our actions. Okay. It's not always easy to change our reactions because those are triggers, but our actions can be changed. So if I change my actions, so basically what I say, I just decide, you know what, I'm going to stop saying this one thing. I'm going to change that. And the next time I speak to this person, I will just say it in a different way. Then we have the option of experimenting. So all of a sudden, those actions become experiments, and we can control the conversation by saying, you know what, I'm going to say this. Doesn't work, next time I'm going to try something else. Next time after that, I'm going to try something else. And every single time you're breaking their stock standard reaction, because now they're not reacting within the system anymore, and you're breaking out of the system. Right. So, roles and adversaries. So sometimes we get accidental adversaries. People at work are not necessarily all against us, but when somebody is in a specific role, for instance, let's say you're in finance and specifically in quality control and quality process control, you're going to have a lot of adversaries or inadvertent adversaries within a company, because you're going to have to tell people or give them feedback as to where things are not going well. The moment you do that, your role has basically created that adversarial scenario. And that's where it becomes really important to separate the what from the whom. Is this the role of the person that is making them, putting them in an adversarial situation? Or is this the content? Or is it me? Where is it going? You know? And very often it's role-based or accidental adversaries, people that aren't really all negative and nasty. So I would say in about 99% of cases, people are actually quite nice and the intentions are not bad. It just doesn't come across that way. So big picture. The ability to take a step back, just take a breath and look at where does this conversation fit into the bigger whole. If it's a relationship, let's say for instance, I used to be a smoker. So for me, smoking was a coping mechanism. So I smoked, went out, had a conversation, phone call, and all the time the smoking became more and more of a habit. So that every single time I was on a phone call, I went outside and had a smoke. Now, the more active a project gets, the more phone calls you have to do, and the more phone calls you have to do, the more I smoked. So eventually running multiple projects with lots of conversations with people that I need to do, majority of my time was spent on the phone with people, which meant the majority of my time was spent outside the company, which was spent on a smoke. So I eventually had to change that. Going from 10 cigarettes a day to like 40 was not a good idea. And so what helped me there is taking the step back and going, but what is the need that the cigarettes will fill? What does it help me with? Why did it exist as a coping mechanism? And then realizing that I don't really need it. And then I had to work for about 6 months to get the big picture and use that to quit smoking. But it allowed me to take a step back and think, well, okay, if I should die too early, that means my husband's going to be stuck with paying all the bills. What will that do to him emotionally? Do I really want to cause that kind of pain for someone? And taking a look at the more holistic and bigger picture, I was able to say, you know what, maybe the rewards from smoking is not nearly as much as the rewards I will get from quitting smoking. So that's just an example of big picture, but it could also be that you're in a fight with somebody in an apartment, and when you take a step back, you realize that this fight, in the bigger scheme of things, is not really worth it. Okay. So when we look at a systems view, we say, well, we look at option number 1, which was me and you interactions. Number 2 was roles and adversaries. Number 3 is taking the big picture or taking a step back, and then I get back to me again. So constantly when we have these relationship triggers, it's important to figure out, is it a me and you interaction? Can I mitigate this by understanding the roles, or that I can change my actions in the me and you interactions? Are we just accidental adversaries, or are we real adversaries? And 3, can I take a step back? So now what we're going to look at next is identity. So we talked about relationship triggers, and we're talking about identity triggers now. So when we look at identity triggers, several typical things like, I'm not good enough, I'm always like this, I'm never going to get this right. It tends to always end up with things like, it tends to end up with ever, never, always types of exaggerations. Now, we've all been there, we've all gone through that, and we've all experienced the thing where I say, well, it's all me, and I'm all terrible. Just know that you're not. You're probably wonderful and fantastic, and give yourself a break. All right, we're going to look a little bit more into detail what happens. All right. So some of the things are wiring and temperament. Why are we the way we are? Now, I'm just going to skip forward to another slide first, and I'll come back to these buttons. Why is this not moving on to the next slide? There we go. All right. So, and then it runs all the way to where you don't want to be, right? Sorry, give me a second here. PowerPoint crashed. Let's just get it back. There we go. There's PowerPoint starting again. Sorry about that, guys. Get it back in a second. Clara, can you see things now? Sorry, I'm only seeing your WhatsApp coming in now.
Yes, yes, I can see. Yeah, I restarted my computer and I am now with a phone call.
All right. Okay. It's taking a while to open up. This is not normal. So you switch over power supplies because the current power supply doesn't seem to work either. Sorry, guys. That should now work better. Slideshow. Here we go. Share screen. Everybody can see that again?
Yes.
Right, good. Now, let's quickly jump back to where we were. All right. So this is where we want to be. So the last thing we looked at is wiring and temperament. So when we look at, there's different research studies on this. I've just sort of rounded things up a little bit. But in general, about 50% of who we are is genetically predisposed. So our genes does two things. On the one hand, genes are there and dictate certain things. And then there are certain genes that can be switched on or switched off. That's called epigenetics, and there's usually an environmental input on that is required as well. So, but 50% of who we are is either predetermined or we have a tendency towards. So as we go along in life, we get involved in certain circumstances or an environment, and the environment has an impact on us. And then we decide, either consciously or subconsciously, to react to that environment. And that's where we build something called coping mechanisms. And those coping mechanisms are types of behavior that can be triggered by things in our environment, but it's something that we've grown over the years or built up over the years. So when we have intentional or unintentional activities, those are really the things that we can make a difference on. So we can change the way we behave towards certain things, although we might not be able to change the way we feel them. So when we look at emotional states, let's say an up is feeling happy and a low is feeling sad. This changes over time. So we will have different peaks and troughs depending on how we go through a day. So somebody might come in the morning, say hi to you with a friendly smile, and you feel like, okay, that's an up. And the next moment somebody walks in and says, what the hell have you done here? And then it's a down. Right. So this is the kind of stuff we go through every day. So for some people, the ups and the downs are higher than for others. And what we can do is we can learn certain techniques to help us navigate that. So for instance, with mindfulness, we can help ourselves to make the troughs less, because mindfulness helps us to live in the moment and to not over-exaggerate things or only focus on the things that are relevant. So it helps us to get out of the dips. Another technique is called savoring, and savoring helps us to hold peaks and hold them for longer. It's like an ice cream. You know, you take your first lick of an ice cream and it's like, yes, this is why I bought it. Okay. And then you have the second spoon and it's like, this is nice. And by the third spoon, you sort of go like, you know what? Not as nice anymore. But now imagine if you can always have that first lick of the spoon, that kind of experience. And that's what savoring helps you to do. It sort of allows you to just hold on to that moment. So those kind of techniques that you can look into and explore. Now, for all of us, we have a happiness bandwidth. So you see the top green line, the bottom green line. And when we go into our ups and downs, we tend to eventually even out into the middle or into our happiness average. Now that happiness average and the bandwidth between those two lines, the top and the bottom, we can move towards, or between, is different for everybody. So my happiness bandwidth could be much lower than yours, or vice versa. So for instance, sustain and recovery, so we're talking about savoring and mindfulness. Sustain is how long can we hold the positive, and recovery is how quickly do we get back from a negative. Okay. Swing is basically how high we can go and how low we can go. Now the variability in the bandwidth is about 3,000%. So when you talk in front of a room of people and you say something, the impact on people can be 3,000% different. So when people say, I treat everybody equally, and by that mean I treat everybody the same, nobody's going to feel equally treated. So when we realize that when we have a leadership role, that every single person that reports into us is going to experience how we deal with them differently, it's important to understand how sensitive are they to that impact. Okay. So when we look on the impact on feedback, all right, so we have the, some people recover quite quickly. So that's on the left-hand side, recovery. So they recover quickly, and it's a case of not a big deal. People that are slow on the recovery tend to hate feedback, especially if their positive, the ability to hold on to something positive or the sustain is short, then they end up in the hate feedback quadrant. If it's long, so basically they can hold on to positive things, it's hopeful but fearful. So let's give you an example. I hear something positive from my boss and I go like, okay, that's good. But then for the rest of the week, I only hear negative things from him. So I end up being in that hopeful but fearful state. So sometimes I get this tantalizing little bit of information that I look forward to because that's the appreciation that is expressed. And the rest of the time, I'm a little bit afraid of getting the feedback. So if we can help ourselves and others to recover faster from the negatives and hold on to the positives for longer, we end up in a place where people love feedback, or where that feedback actually is seen as a positive element. So it also means that the more positives we do, the easier it is to get people to love feedback instead of falling into the hate feedback section. So our emotional soundtrack. Now this is the Moods album. It's actually an album by Mike Oldfield. But I just thought a world of emotions is so typical. We have this emotional soundtrack going off in our head that gets us into an emotional spiral. So we hear something that has a negative element, and then we just add to that, make it more and more and more negative. Okay? Because we've created this narrative in our mind, or this orchestra that's actually playing this music for us that gets us in negative mood. So we can break out of that. And that we'll get back to in a second. So, have you ever heard of the Google bias? Now, what you can see there in the text, it says everything that is wrong with me. I would like to dare you to type that into Google and see the amount of responses you got. The last time I did that, I got about 219 million. So this is a bit of a bias. So the moment I think, what are all the things that are wrong with me? I have an answer for every single thing that's wrong with me. And it's not nearly as bad as we make it out to be. So we tend to think there's a lot more wrong with us than there really is. Okay. So we need to be aware of that we tend to over-exaggerate things. Right. Do we have any questions up to this point?
No, I feel very clear.
Anybody else? Erin, you okay there? All right. So these are the books that I normally use. Of course, thanks for the feedback. It's written by two Harvard professors, Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen, actually lecturers at Harvard, and they also work with the Harvard Negotiation Project. They also have their own consultancy firm in Boston. And I just love their book because it's a very easy way of getting into feedback and understanding feedback. So this is actually for webinar 3, but what I'll do is I'll just quickly touch on one or two things I think that might be important. I just want to quickly pop this up in a slightly different way. Screen a bit bigger. Okay. So there are a few ways of dismantling distortions. Okay, so we're going to quickly look at just 3 of them. I put in 5 here, but it's just 3. Why does this thing not convert it now? There we go. So one is be prepared and be mindful. So when you're in a conversation with someone, in the feedback conversation, you need to know your feedback footprint. So what are the things that you tend to find as triggers? So what kind of emotional triggers, truth triggers are there, identity triggers are there, and or relationship triggers are there? In this instance, we're talking about identity. So, but it's also on the other triggers. It's also something to understand the other triggers. You can inoculate yourself against the worst. So you just basically do a worst case scenario rundown through your mind before you have the conversation. And you're like, okay, what is the worst thing that can happen? They can tell me they don't like me, and then what else? You know? Noticing what is happening, so being able to take that step back and seeing what's going on. And then separating the strands. This is basically, what are the feelings? What am I feeling? What are the story? What is the narrative or the context is being created? And what is the feedback? So what is the content that somebody is trying to tell me? Another idea is to say, well, how can I contain the story? Can I put it time box? So when does this apply? Is it specific enough? Can they give me an example of what they're talking about? And who are the people that are involved? Myself and somebody else, or 2 other people we're talking about. So it helps us to use these different ways of looking at things, or these 3 different ways of looking at things, to separate our identity from the conversation. The next thing is cultivating a growth identity. Now, just before we get to that, I want to quickly stand still about and just talk about something that women are really good at and men not so much. There's a recent study that's come out and said that any team can be improved by adding women. So that sounds a bit weird, but basically it boils down to is they did a study to figure out what kind of teams are more clever, so ones that can solve problems better. And the outcome was the teams with more women. So people tend to ask, okay, so what does that mean? More than 50% women? No, just more women. So if you have 2 teams of 5 people, and in one team you have 1 woman, and in another team you have 2, the chances are the team with 2 women is going to outperform the team with 1 woman. Right? The same with 2 and 3, the same with 3 and 4. So it tends to be that teams consisting of women tend to do better at creative problem solving than men do. And there's one big reason behind that. There's a test you guys can also do on my website called the mind in the eyes. And it's your ability to see in someone's eyes what their emotions are and how they're feeling. So if you can see that, you're really going to be more open to treating them in accordance to the way that they feel. So if somebody's upset, you're going to try and mitigate the conversation. If somebody's happy, you're going to try and spread the happiness. And if you're not aware of somebody being sad or upset or happy, you can't steer the conversation, you can't interact properly. And women have been shown to be much more sensitive to other people's emotions. They can see the emotions much better in the body language and not just the words. And that's what the power is that drives creativity and innovation, is the ability to communicate well with each other, to have an equal voice, and to have all ideas come to the table. And you cannot have that if you do not give everybody a chance to speak. And you won't have that if you don't understand that people have the need to speak. So the basis of the study is be aware of other people's emotions, and teams can become more clever. And if you want to earn the side of caution, just add more women. That's one side. The other thing is we talked about earlier about affiliation. And the recent studies have also shown that people experience social exclusion as physical pain. So in your brain, the same pathways that are used for registering pain and reacting to pain are triggered when people are socially excluded. So if you have an argument with someone and you ignore them, it's easier for you to take a baseball bat and hit them in the face, because the pain is going to be the same. But none of us have the guts to hit somebody in the face with a baseball bat. So why do we exclude people? And I think that's something that we can make a difference in the world by showing people that they're included. And that changes people's behavior, because we're removing pain from their lives. And there's a huge positive response that normally follows from that. Blanca, you asked if I can share the study. Improving team performance. Later this week, Blanca, I will have it on my website. I will have, because I'm busy writing an article, and I'm linking to the study in that as well. And if you just remind me after this, I can also just send you the study. It's fine. Okay. Right, growing identity or growth identity. We sometimes have denial. So part of identity footprint is, no, I'm not like that. No, that's not really the thing, and so on. Exaggerations, doom spirals, sort of, oh yes, I'm always like that. No, I'm never going to grow up. Yes, my mother's told me that since I was a young boy or a young girl, and I'm just the worst. So going from one extreme to the other. So we always also experience something called identity quakes. So when we have that denial popping up, things like, it's not true, you don't get it, not my fault, you want to talk. So anything that triggers that I am wrong or the wrong party is something that we need to be aware of. So we tend to react to things like that with exaggeration. Maybe that's true. Maybe what they're thinking about me is right. It's all my fault. So typically me, I can't do anything right. Those are the things we need to be aware of and then move on from it. So how do we survive these identity quakes? How to survive these triggers? Beware of all the denials and the exaggerations. Just ask a simple question. What do you have to fear? Why would it be so bad if this was true? And if this was true, what the person is saying, or what I feel about myself, what's the outcome of it? Look at the future scope, and not towards the past alone. Right. Identify your hot buttons, so the things that trigger you, so that when they happen in a conversation, you can actually look at it and go like, okay, that's a button, and I don't have to react to it. In the beginning, it's going to be difficult. You're going to still react to it, but the reaction will already be milder just by being aware of it. Okay. Then create a realistic foundation for your identity. So if you know that certain things give you identity quake or triggers your identity, just take a step back, go think about it. Think about what would be a realistic view of the situation and of the conversation, and then adjust so that you find your new role or your new view of yourself within that context. Okay. And then through practice, we learn to regain our balance. So get people to start telling you things that are negative that you know are going to press in your hot buttons. Ask a few friends that you know what you will be able to forgive them again afterwards, because it's important to do as well. Let them trigger those hot buttons, see how you react to them. Let them start screaming at you instead of talking to you when you're trying to trigger one of those buttons. It's one of the exercises I do with people as well. In the one when I did it at Harvard, I was actually standing on a desk screaming at somebody that was sitting on the floor, just to get the sort of dominance and sort of like, I'm feeling smaller than the other person, all those kind of things are triggers. And we just simulated that to help you sort of regain your balance. And by practicing it a few times, it means that the next time you're in a conversation where one of these things are triggered, one of these hot buttons are triggered, you just go like, okay, that was it. And what did I do last time? Okay, I know I don't have to react. I know I can give a more positive response. Okay. Then, part of grounding your identity is things like three things we should accept. All of us will make mistakes. Our intentions are complex and never pure. And yes, I have contributed to the problem. I'm not without blame. But it doesn't mean I have to have all the blame. Right. So you guys have heard of a growth versus a fixed mindset? Right. So growth mindset basically means, the short and sweet answer to that is the future can be better, and the fixed mindset is things will continue as they are. So people with a fixed mindset tend to think, I cannot change, things cannot change, my environment's always going to impact me, I don't have any control, things like that. Now you can create a growth mindset. There's quite a lot of literature available on this, but it's something I would suggest you explore if you have a tendency to think of immutability and things in ways that things cannot change. Please go read some of this literature. We don't unfortunately have time tonight to go into detail on that. And this is where I'm going to stop for tonight, because we need to stop at some point and we can't go on for the whole evening. And webinar 4 is something we'll look into more after the workshops in June. More questions or other questions? No one?
So I was thinking of the red button, and you mentioned to practice with somebody. So I am thinking now with a kid. Because I don't like when they are screaming or when they are upset, and then it makes me feel upset as well. So, and this is, I think, I don't know, Blanca, if you can help me here, but it's more when, I think when the kids are upset, they provide you feedback like, oh, I hate you, I don't like you, Mama. And it makes me sad. I think it's this red button when they are super crazy. And then immediately I am upset as well, because I don't like this, like they're upset. So that's my question to you, Eksteen. What to do in this situation?
Okay, you're asking me about feedback and children. Maybe not the right time. I've got godchildren, but I don't have any children of my own, No,
but it's the same thing. They are people.
It's similar, maybe similar. Let me give you an example from my experience. Then I guess it might. I don't know if it'll help. Just let's see. One lady I worked with before. She's a lawyer in a firm of construction workers, or basically builders. So it's all these big, burly, muscular men, like and quite tall, and she's very petite, and sort of people treat her as well as if she's breakable, And she's not. She's got a core of steel. She's a good, I mean, a really solid person. You know, you don't move her easily, but she always gets treated that way. So one of the things we've worked with is that she sometimes felt a little bit insignificant because people tend to dominate her and dominate the conversation. So that is the exercise that I actually did with her, is standing on a table. So it started off with just a conversation and trying to dominate her in the conversation and see how she reacts to it. And then we tend to push it to the limit where you break. So basically where you become emotional to the point that you can't control it anymore. So you either cry or you get angry or you lose control of the emotion, right? And I usually do that with more than one person, usually a psychologist present as well. And so we really try and push it to that limit. And then the next thing is, okay, now that you've managed that limit, let's talk about it. We sometimes videotape it as well so you can see your reactions. And that gives you a third person view. And we talk about how you can cope with it, how you can deal with it. And then just by doing that reflection, you start working out a strategy for yourself. So the next step then is, how do we make it worse? So that's when you sort of put people on the ground and stand over them or stand on a desk over them, you know, so make it bigger and bigger and bigger, till you get to a point where it doesn't really matter if somebody's trying to dominate you or the conversation. You just go like, okay, I understand what you're trying to do, but unfortunately, that's not why we're here today. If you don't mind, let's focus on the task at hand. And all of a sudden, there's no interactions that immediately trigger those negative effects. Now, doing a session like that is really intense, and we usually do about 3-4 hour session like that with individuals, so it's really, really intense. But for a friend, it's easier if you just ask your friend to tell you those triggers that would normally trigger you. So for instance, if you get triggered by somebody telling you, you know what, you're just a girl in a man's world, what do you know? Okay, that might be the feeling they give you, not necessarily what they say. Then get a friend to tell you that. And if it's not, if you don't get, even if women tell you that and they don't trigger you, but only men do, then I would suggest ask a gay friend, which is less threatening, all right, to tell you that, so that you can more easily manage your response. And then increase the intensity, increase those things that trigger the things in your mind. So be vulnerable and share with, you know what, if somebody tells me that I don't matter, I have a strong reaction. Or if I feel I don't matter, then start with the person telling you, you know what, you don't matter, and see what your reaction is. And then increase, you know, you've never mattered. Okay, even your mother didn't think you mattered. Even your dad didn't think you mattered. Your siblings couldn't care about you. You know, you start adding all these additional elements to it. See what triggers, because that is something that has a core of truth that you can work with. Some things are so intense that you might have to go see a psychologist. Okay, because sometimes there's a little bit of things that are broken over the years, and to fix them, we've created coping mechanisms to mask them, but we haven't fixed the underlying problem. And to do that, we need help from people that are professionals. Now, I'm not a professional. I do this in a work environment, and I respect psychologists, psychiatrists for what they do. And I've also seen my own fair share of psychologists in my life, because I feel that sometimes when they said certain things in my life that I think needs fixing or needs an expert eye on it, okay, I need to go to an expert to get the information that I need. But I don't think you can ask your children to scream at you more. I don't think that's going to be a positive impact on you or them.
Yeah, because I am trying to figure out if, okay, I understand your point. Really focused in the food today. Yeah, that's the thing I am doing, no? Okay, we are in the table, we are getting dinner, and that's the thing we have to do now. Yeah, I think we are having like 2 hours dinner. Yeah, focus, keep calm, going on. So the other question I have is about the growth mindset. Eksteen.
Yes.
So, what is this? So how to reach this level of growth mindset?
Okay. Let me quickly get you the name. The growth and fixed mindset is something that was, the first studies of that was done on children. It's by Carol, what's her name again? Carol Drucker, I think it was. No, Carol Dweck. Let me just share the screen with you and you see what I mean. This is the professor that studied it, Carol Dweck. And she defined the whole concept of fixed and growth mindsets, right? And the basic premise is it, I mean, there's a Harvard Business Review article here as well. There's quite a lot of things available on it. Let's open that as well. So the basics of a fixed mindset, most people think that they cannot change and that the environment that you're in makes you stuck and that you're always only going to react to your environment and cannot proactively act. A growth mindset is, I'm not controlled by my environment. I can decide how I react to my environment and that I can change. I'm not stuck in who I am is not fixed. It's not a given. Now, some of these things, if you look back about the 70s, there was a lot of psychology that came from Jungian psychology, amongst other things. And it was based, and Freud, you know, that said, we are in a certain way. And that's created the impression that we cannot change. Once we're an adult, we don't change. Some of the other studies come from neurobiology, where they said at a certain age, usually late teens, early 20s, your brain does not change physically anymore. Because it doesn't change physically anymore, doesn't grow, doesn't become bigger, you've stopped growing, you are who you are. Now, recent studies have shown that if you lose something, for instance, so one person, they lost their sight and they got an electronic implant that gave them some stimuli similar to sight, and their brain actually adapted and changed to interpret this as sight. So they started being able to determine, to see shapes again and colors again through an electronic implant. Okay. So we know that, and we also know that we have to be able to interpret things, otherwise we can't do, it doesn't have meaning for us. So for instance, another guy got an eye operation to repair or damage to his eyes, but the damage happened so early on in his life that he never really saw before. So now his mind is getting all these stimuli in, and it doesn't know what to do with it. And it's been 6 or 7 years now, and he still can't do much with that information. It's very confusing for him. So there's two things in there. On the one hand, we can change, and our brains change, and the way that our brain's interconnectedness is determined change. So for instance, if there's a part of the brain that's damaged, our brain will reroute and rewire around it biologically to help us change. So we know there can be physical changes in the brain that is triggered by the way that we interact with our environment. So on a biological way we can change, and that also means on an emotional way we can change. And that's where the growth mindset idea started off, by saying, well, if we can then change, why do we stay the same? Why don't we allow ourselves to grow? And the research has shown that it's mostly because people believe that they cannot change. Because biologically we know people can. And that's the difference between growth and fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is just the belief that I cannot change, and the growth mindset is I can change.
Okay, yeah. So it's more the Darwin in the moment, so not in the decades or evolution of the human beings or the animals, but more in the evolution in the now.
On the one hand, it's internal, but we also
can adapt in the ecosystem. Yeah.
There's also a physical aspect to it. So we know that both physically and emotively, there is an impact if we change our perception. So changing our perception allows us to physically rewire our brains. Which is a really powerful thing if we think about that. That means tomorrow we can be completely different from today, and we can choose what we want to be like tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm just quickly going to copy this link here. Oh, come on. Why is this thing not? Where are this? Where's the chats? There we go. Chat. There we go. I'm just going to send you this link as well. You can read a little bit more about the growth mindset.
Yeah.
On the Harvard Business Review. It's another thing that might be interesting to note is, did I mention Frans de Waal the last time in the webinar?
No, Frans de Waal? No.
He's not a relation of mine or a family member of mine, but he's a primatologist. He studies basically bonobos, chimpanzees, and he's quite well respected in his field. And he started drawing comparisons between humans and primates. And there's a book he wrote about basically about politics in primates. So I'm just trying to get that. There would not be an atheist. Okay. I'm just going to send you the Wikipedia article as well. This is basically Frans de Waal. So one of the things that I like about what Frans says is he's one of the people that were sort of the father of the idea of alpha male and alpha females. So alpha males and females tend to be in charge. So let's say in the work environment, let's take Wall Street. That's the one with the corner office, getting the big paycheck and telling everybody what to do. Yes, they're allowed to be the alpha because we give them the opportunity to be so. There is a quid pro quo expected. When, for lack of a better expression, when the shit hits the fan, they are there to protect us. If they do not, they're failing in their duty of care, and they will be ousted. That's something typically that happens with primates as well. It doesn't matter who the alpha male or alpha female is, depending on bonobos or chimpanzees. They are there by the graces of the people or the truth. So we need to take care of those people that we have in our care as leaders within the organization. And taking care of people and protecting them is generally seen as a positive and not as a weakness. Because people will love you because you care. People will hate you because you don't. So showing you care, I personally believe, is never a wrong way to go.
So I am thinking now, because today you mentioned two very important things in this webinar. One was like make people feel included in the group, in the team, for a good leader, I mean, and the other is protecting the people.
Yeah.
So to include the people in the team or to feel them they are in the team, we are working together, and to protect them are key psychological points for a good leader. And as I remember, nobody's talking about this too.
No, and they also don't understand the importance of women within that. And that's something that I keep on underscoring more and more now in businesses as well. One of the teams I'm working with at the moment is I basically told the manager, get more women. You've got one woman in the team. Get more women. You're a creative team. You're supposed to be creative. You're not, because these little men are like the the Dutch call it haantjesgedrag, which is basically means like little cockerel behavior. They run around, kick each other, peck each other, and for the rest, nothing happens. There's this woman called Heffernan. I need to give you the TED talk. I just thought it was very funny how she explained it. But basically, Heffernan, let's say TED, there we go. Margaret. It's called the pecking order. So like chickens pecking at each other. Okay, say this. And link it and share it. There we go. Right. So it's just an analogy that Margaret uses that I really think is very powerful. She said you take a bunch of chickens and you start breeding them to lay eggs. All right. So you end up with a chicken that can lay amazing eggs. The problem is there's such a lot of other things that you breed out of the chicken that you get these chickens killing each other. And because they kill each other, the total production is still only the same as what you started off with or less. So when we're in a work environment, we tend to compete. So we're working against each other, and we're only keeping those people that are the best at working against everybody else. So we take the top of the competitiveness, which are individually quite okay, but get them to cooperate, and they fall flat. And in that cooperation is where we really see the value. So a team is always bigger than the sum of its parts when the team is a team, i.e. a cohesive whole, not just a bunch of individuals. So we can rather stimulate people to work well together than get them to work well against each other. And most measurement systems, KPIs, evaluation systems, and ways in which we reward people in companies are geared towards competition and not cooperation. So we're creating an environment where people cannot really flourish. And that to me is a sad thing. So adding more women.
Super interesting. Yeah.
So when we add more women, the women tend to be aware of other people's emotions, how they feel, how they see the world, and so on. And then they created the connectedness. And because we create that connectedness, we create better cohesion. Because we create better cohesion, the conflicts deteriorate, right? All the better ideas are surfacing to the top, and the whole team performs better, especially when it comes to problem-solving tasks. So if you're a woman, you can pat yourself on the shoulder and go like, yes, okay. Sorry, Erin, you need to unmute yourself before you talk. I can see you talking, but I can't hear you. There we go.
I happen to agree with what you're saying about women. I find myself, though, interestingly, I spent most of my career in consulting, which is very male-dominated. And the last 8 years, I've been in marketing in the same company, but very female-dominated. And Hara and Blanca know some of the saga of what I've been dealing with. But I happen to agree in for women who are healthy and positive in what they contribute, what you're saying. But I find myself in a very toxic situation with a lot of what I call mean girls. And so what you're calling out as very positive attributes of women, in this case, is very negative. The worst way that they can perceive and know what is hurtful, and instead of using that to ensure that people feel included, they use it to try to establish pecking order and to exclude others and to get ahead. And I'm watching before my eyes exactly what you said about they're eating each other, they're destroying each other, and the team doesn't perform because everyone is so busy smiling, but then going, behind their back. So.
And you're in the fashion industry.
No, I'm in technology, in marketing.
But is it attached to fashion industry?
Well, that's some of the work that we do. That's how Hara and I met. But that was just a one-off project, honestly, that I did. Most of the time we're doing events.
Mm-hmm.
Events and all industry, banking and mostly IT, you know.
And what is your reward systems based around?
It's really affinity. It's a association with our boss, because no one's really gotten raises in the last 5 years because our company has not been performing very well. And so you get prestige by how you are positioned as a leader in the organization. And if you're friends with the right leaders and you are seen as close to them and kissing up to them, that's the only way I can say it. That's how you get position and power. And, you know, it's funny, in the past, I've led many, I've had positions where I've led 200 people. I have positions where I've led 2, where I've led 10, 15. The last 2 years, I've been a leader, a strategic leader, and I haven't led people. But, you know, I've often thought what I'm about to say, when I've heard other people say it, is kind of a victim excuse, honestly, incorrectly. You know, I'm learning. But I found myself basically the victim of people who play that game really well. And what I do is I work really hard. I focus on the results. And I'm finding myself in a situation where I haven't partied at the events with my boss. I haven't partied with all the other people. I haven't falsely sucked up to them and become their friends. I've just been myself, which I've been friendly. I just haven't, you know, made an effort to behave in the way that they would like me to make them feel a certain way. And I've outperformed them. And as a result, I've been demoted in my job.
That's somebody being very stupid there, and it's not you.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you, I'm not exaggerating when I say this, and Hara is a witness to it. I mean, you know, I just helped bring in, you know, $16 million worth of free press and marketing, and my colleague who just got promoted to an executive missed a target, an attendee target for our last event by 20 million, and she just got promoted. And, you know, I'm going like, it makes no sense to me. Yeah. But your presentation, I work for IBM.
All right.
Yeah, but I have to tell you, your presentation is really valuable, because I'm just continuing to learn that, you know, sometimes there just has to be a posturing that you have to do, or choose to go somewhere else where you don't have to. But if you stay in a certain culture like that, you know, you have to posture in a way, you have to work the system that's there or find a different place, right? Yeah.
In some ways, the thing is, okay, I'm going to tell you about a book. I almost never recommend this book, because if you follow it to a T and you apply it to your personal life as well, you're going to turn into a psychopath. All right? And I don't wish that on my worst enemy. All right? But on the other hand, when it comes to company politics, and IBM is a big company, it's similar to things like Shell or KPN or whatever, or Deutsche Telekom, huge multinationals. Politics is there. I tend to tell people, you know what, if you're going to go and play chess during a soccer game, you shouldn't be surprised when you get a ball to the head, because you're playing the wrong game on the wrong court.
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
And company politics is the same. You can either say, I don't participate, right? Which basically means you're sitting there playing a different game. Or you can be aware of what the game is, and then take the power into your own hands and decide how you're going to react to it and what you're going to do with it. but it takes a very adult person to make those decisions without making them as an emotive consequence or a lashing out. So that's why I think the feedback side of things is important to understand first, understand how to do conflict management, and then go into exploring, but how can you use those manipulations that seems to be so prevalent, either for your benefit or at least not to your detriment. Okay. The book is How Do I Become a Rat? It's by a Dutch author. Okay.
Okay.
I've got it here on my shelf. I've read it. I've resisted reading it for about 7 years. And then I was going through some major political drama at a customer, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to read this because everybody's been telling me to read this. So I read it, and then I realized, okay, but I just have to be very, very careful. If I just let go and just do these principles in the book, I will not be the person that I can look into the mirror anymore at. I would not like what I see. And that to me is more important, to be authentic and to be myself. And then within a context, of course, I can't work outside of the context that I'm given. One of the reasons why I decided to start for myself is because there's certain contexts that I was just not willing to participate in anymore. And now I can take a step back and help others deal with the context that they're stuck in. And I find it very empowering, and I actually love doing that.
Well, thank you for that.
I'll just type the book's name here for you as well, so that you don't. But it's as I said, be careful, please. I'd hate to lose good people to this book. You know?
No, yeah. I apologize. I have to run. I'm actually going to an interview. Wish me luck. Because I need an alternative.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. It was very helpful and encouraging.
It's a pleasure. And if you ever want to just sort of like brainstorm or chat, just let me know. I'm usually available.
Okay. Thank you.
Pleasure. Okay. Any other questions?
I think we are all three. So we are 18 minutes above. I think it was very nice, Eksteen.
Okay.
Very, very useful, very professional, like always. I am always learning with you new things. Yeah, I think, Blanca, do you want to add something else?
You're muted. I don't hear you. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Now I hear you.
Yeah, now yes, yeah.
Okay, great. I want to add a commercial for the recording that if you like this webinar, I hope you did, you come to our event that Eksteen is going to kindly facilitate for us. That is on the Saturday 9th of June, and it is in RSM. And we still have early bird fee for those ones who want to join us. All data will be given in the in the text before the text following this video, and the title is Superwoman Discovering Your Superpowers. So in this event, he will help us to connect to who we are and how powerful we are. So that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you.
For that. I'm really looking forward to that event as well. I think it's going to be interesting. It's especially to help people discover what makes them motivated and makes them feel happy in what they do every day.
So I guess, yeah, well, officially we can finish. Thank you, everybody, and for the people who will listen to the recording. Thank you, Eksteen.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Eksteen.
Yeah. So I guess we go away. Have a nice evening.
Yeah.
Have a nice evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.